Good Friday, everyone. I'm Cyrus Webb, and welcome to Conversation Daily News. Glad you all could be with us. Well, we made it to the end of another week. We, of course, have your news headlines coming up on this Friday. For a message from my book, Words I Choose to Live By, and in today's Entertainment Spotlight, you got to be part of our conversation with filmmaker and author Nick Brooks. He joined me on Conversations Live, the radio show, to talk about his brand new book, Promise Boys. You guys will be hearing part of that conversation today. Enjoy our broadcast. For Conversation Daily News, I'm Cyrus Webb with their Friday headlines. In national news, Biden's handwritten notes, part of classified document probe. President Joe Biden is a man who writes down his thoughts, and some of those handwritten musings over his decades of public service are now a part of a special counsel's investigation into the handling of classified documents. It isn't clear yet what the investigators are looking for by taking custody of notes from his time as vice president and his decades in the Senate that were found in his Delaware homes in Rehoboth Beach and Wilmington. Biden's attorneys did not say whether the notes were considered to be classified, only that they were removed. But over his 36 years in the Senate and 8 as vice president, Biden had a front row seat to a lot of highly sensitive moments in U.S. history, including the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, the 2011 death of Osama bin Laden, and unfolding political turmoil in Ukraine. The special counsel is working to determine how classified information from Biden's time as senator and vice president came to wind up in his home and former office, and whether any mishandling involved criminal intent or was unintentional. That they'll also have to determine whether the notes they took are considered personal and therefore belong to Biden and would then likely be returned to him. Under the Presidential Records Act, records of a presidential administration generally belongs with the National Archives, especially classified items. There are some exceptions, including when records are determined to be purely personal. But even a handwritten note can be considered classified if someone is recording observations related to a classified document or a briefing. Such notes can be deemed classified even if not marked as such. A former senior director of the White House Situation Room and chief of staff to retired CIA Director Michael Hayden said that when he took notes during secret or top secret meetings, he would mark each page by levels of classification. Longtime aides say they believe Biden has been keeping personal diaries for decades, though the only public glimpse of them so far has come in Biden's book, Promise Me, Dad. In the book, Biden quotes passages written in his diary about Bo's condition and death that were written on Air Force Two in the vice president's residence at the Naval Observatory in Washington and at his home in Wilmington, as well as one jotted down as he waited whether to run for president in 2016. In the book, Biden described taking the notes as he navigated being a supportive parent for an ailing family member and largely maintaining his official schedule of meetings and calls. In more national news, first sweeping federal gun crime report in 20 years released. The most expansive federal report in over 2 decades on guns and crimes show a shrinking turnaround between the time a gun was purchased and when it was recovered from a crime scene, indicating firearms bought legally are more quickly being used in crimes around the country. It also documents a spike in the use of conversion devices that make a semi-automatic gun fire like a machine gun, along with the growing seizure of so-called ghost guns, privately made firearms that are hard to trace. The report comes as the nation grapples with a rise in violent crime, particularly from guns. Much of the data from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives report hasn't been widely available before, and its release is aimed at helping police and policymakers reduce gun violence, said the director. Information is power, he said. In more national news, Joe Biden and Bill Clinton marked 3 decades of Family Leave Act. President Joe Biden played host to former President Bill Clinton to mark the 30th anniversary of the Family Medical Leave Act, the first piece of legislation that the 42nd president signed into law after taking office in 1993. Biden and Clinton took part in an event on Thursday at the White House to put the spotlight on legislation that guaranteed many American workers up to 12 unpaid weeks off to recover from major illness or childbirth or to take care of a sick family member. In international news, Russia hit civilian targets anew. EU officials visit Kyiv. Russian missiles hit residential areas in eastern Ukrainian cities on Thursday for the second time in 24 hours, while top European Union officials held talks with the government in Kyiv as the war with Russia approaches its 1-year milestone. The latest strikes came as rescue crews searched for survivors in the rubble of an apartment building hit late Wednesday by a Russian missile that killed at least 3 people and wounded 21 others. At least one more victim was thought to be under the debris, the Ukrainian presidential office said. And finally, in business news, Wall Street's rally rolls on, led by torrid tech stocks. Wall Street closed higher, led by excitement around tech stocks and a surge for Facebook's parent company Meta Platforms. The S&P 500 rose 1.5% Thursday, a day after hitting its highest level since the summer. The Nasdaq Composite jumped 3.3%, led by a 23.3% surge in Meta. The Dow lagged behind because it has less of an emphasis on tech. Cyrus Webb, Conversations Daily News. It's on time for a message from my book, Words I Choose to Live By. Enjoy. Good Friday, everyone. I'm Cyrus Webb, and welcome to Words I Choose to Live By. There is nothing worse than being a prisoner in a jail of your own choosing. Do not allow your circumstances to keep you held up when your freedom has already been granted. Accept the pardon you have been given and use the opportunity as a way of walking forward, learning from the past, but making the most of the present that is today. Have a great Friday and enjoy your weekend. We are part of my conversation coming up with filmmaker and author Nick Brooks in today's Entertainment Spotlight. Stay with us. You're listening to Conversation Daily News. For Conversation Daily News, I'm Cyrus Webb with Entertainment Spotlight. Author and filmmaker Nick Brooks joined me on Conversations Live, the radio show, to talk about his brand new book, Promise Boys, that I had a chance to read. Here's a bit of our conversation.
But Nick, thank you so much for the time today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cyrus, for having me.
Look, man, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I have to admit, I went into it not knowing what to expect, and it is so much more than I could have expected. So we're going to definitely dive into Promise Boys. But I want to start off by talking about your own promise, Nick, because I thought it was an interesting parallel, especially when I look at characters in the book like Omar. I mean, Omar is another talented individual. You have been recognized for your gifts. What has that been like for you, Nick, to realize the promise in your own life and to embrace that?
I mean, it's been spectacular. You know, it's still a little surreal, everything that's happened over the last few years. You know, I've been an artist for a really long time, trying to find my way as artists do. I graduated from USC Film School in 2020, and you know, it's been a journey. But I'll tell you, it's one I'm excited about, and I think this is just the beginning.
Yeah. And in the book Promise Boys, we're able to meet this cast of characters. Of course, you're being a filmmaker. I mean, you really do help us to bring this to life. I love the way we're able to kind of get to know each one of the characters, the main characters, but also some of the sub-characters as well. So talk to us about kind of what the seed was for this book, Nick. Where did the idea come from?
Yeah, I was actually approached to write this book by an organization called K Creative. They're like a launch pad for young writers. They knew my background. They knew I wrote mystery. They read a script that I read. And we kind of just developed the idea. They said, is this something, you know, would you be interested in writing a mystery set in a school? And I said, of course. And so we developed the idea. I went to Page, I think I did the first 100 pages before we went out on submission. And then over the course of the next, 6 to 8 months, I finished the book. And, you know, now it's out in the world. It just came out Tuesday. So it's been quite a process.
Right.
Cyrus Webb, Conversations Daily News. We thank you all for tuning into this edition of Conversation Daily News. But back to us on Mondays, more news, message from my book, Words I Choose to Live By, and of course your Entertainment Spotlight. Until then, I'm your host, Cyrus Webb, saying as always, enjoy your day, enjoy your life, enjoy your world. Thank you all for choosing Conversation Daily News today. Now let's go make it a great one.